1099A forms.
All right,
Did you
guys.
see the indictments on that guy? Did you see how many indictments he had?
I did. I watched that. And it's just crazy how that propaganda and misinformation spread so fast. Let me catch the screen over here. Welcome, guys. Welcome, everyone. We're going to do a base level study tonight. And not really a study, but just me and Alphonse kicking the ideas back and forth, and actually a good rapport between the two of us, because both of us have been knee deep in reading and writing complaints. I think I'm on my sixth revision right now of maybe even more than that. I'm just calling it the sixth one that I've saved on the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. And one thing that I've learned going through this is that there's a difference between procedural due process and substantive due process. What do you think, Alphonse?
Yeah. I think a lot of people are confused. Like people don't understand they have certain substantive rights that can never be violated. And then you have a procedural due process, which means they've got to do things a certain way to provide you due process of law, such as service of process. Okay. We don't send complaints in the mail to people, because that's why we have these guys called process servers that get paid $100 to $150 to go serve somebody, so that you can get a copy of the complaint and you can have a copy of the summons there, so you know who's coming at you and what their complaint is. Because right now they're confusing everybody with they're depriving them of procedural due process.
Right, and what I want to do tonight is I want to start a foundation where your substantive rights come from, because if you don't have this foundation stone, which you're not going to move from, and I'm going to start with the Bill of Rights, and I'm gonna read something to people many people have heard, but yet it escapes from them the meaning, because we don't do the base level studying, and we see this all the time, Alphonse, with people not even going to define the terms. If you're not going to take the time to go define a word that you think you know what it means versus what it really means, you're starting off on a bad footing. So let me read this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can take that pursuit of happiness and shove property right in it, because that's what it means. Self-evidence is the invisible principle and foundation on which no other foundation can be laid, guys. This is your God-given rights. These are substantive rights. And these are sacred, inviolable rights, which is the purpose of government, to protect these rights. Okay, in this American system of jurisprudence. So a simple word like endowed, right? It's furnished with a portion of estate. Whose estate? Your father's estate, not your earthly father, your heavenly Father. And that's endowed with the gift of life by the Creator, with certain unalienable rights. So in order for somebody to put a lien on your rights, which means a legal claim, right? So these are unalienable rights. And that means not alienable. That cannot be alienated. That may not be transferred. This is life, liberty, and happiness, or rather property. And a direct quote from the Declaration of Independence that I love, and one of the reasons why they did the Declaration of Independence were for taxes for not without consent, right? And we find ourselves in many of these situations here, where we have this simulation of legal process going on inside these municipal courtrooms, bypassing our due process of law. And so when I tell somebody you have to have this foundation that you're willing, what some people call a hill to die on, right? For me, my inherent God-given rights are enough for me to stand on that hill and die. Go ahead, Alphonse.
No, that's pretty much it. Is that like you said, that's the main purpose government was created for, was to protect rights. Okay, and people have sort of that where your public servants now believe that they are your masters, basically, and that they just can control you however they see fit. And the problem we have is we're dealing with these municipalities, which are basically, they're called political subdivisions of the state. So basically you have the state, and then you have these political subdivisions, which are the counties. And then there are political subdivisions of the counties called your towns, your boroughs, your cities. And these are municipal corporations. These are corporations that provide government services. So what they do is they are assigned a territory, and they were granted a charter. They have a charter. They're operating under a charter, and it allows them to collect tax money from the businesses in their territory. And for that exchange of that, they've agreed to give the people, provide services to the people, your schools, plowing the streets, picking up your trash. That's the purpose of government. And that's why they were granted that charter. So what they've done, though, is they've superseded your rights by basically treating you what they call as an inhabitant, because a municipality needs both. Well, we'll hammer this over and over again: a territory and inhabitants. An inhabitant is further defined in American jurisprudence as a member of the corporation. So they're trying, and it's not a straw man thing. They're not saying you're the straw man, you're going to do this. They're saying you're a member of their corporation, basically like you're one of their employees, or you're one of their people, basically, because you're in their territory. They're trying to claim that your physical location creates obligations and duties to them. And that's where you come in and you challenge that through jurisdiction. That's where you bring, lack of personal jurisdiction, lack of subject matter jurisdiction. And the new one they like to throw in is in rem jurisdiction. And people see that on these complaints they get, and they don't even know what it is. And what that is, it's a claim against your property. Okay, they're trying to claim that your property did something. Now, here's what gets weird when you read about what in rem is. They actually state in American jurisprudence that you can't bring an in rem action under the guise of really an in personam action. In other words, you can't mix the two. Okay, so you can't really be bringing the action against me, but claiming you're doing it against my property. But that's what they do on every action. Okay, because really, if they're taking an action against my property, it should be Township of Aston versus my property, versus 713 Post Lane. Okay, but they have my name up there. So wait a minute, you're bringing an action against my property, but you have my name in there. So now you're mixing in personam and you're mixing in rem jurisdiction. But you can never bring an in rem. They can never bring in rem jurisdiction against your property because, like American jurisprudence, they have no rights in the property. You've got to have rights in the thing to bring the action against it. And
yeah, we're going to talk about a very deep subject later. I'll bring up why Roe v. Wade was done the way it was, because of the exclusive property rights. That's how far it went, and we'll talk about that later. But at this time,
I'm going to say that they actually consider the unborn baby property. They've actually stated in American jurisprudence that the unborn baby is property, but then once it's born
alive, it's now guardian and ward relationship. It's no longer property. And so let me slow down real quick there for anybody with family court issues. All right. So by law, possession is 9/10 of the law. I'm going to tell you right now why we're talking about it. We might as well get it over with. Why Roe v. Wade was adjudicated the way it was. Possession's 9/10 of the law. That child is not, quote unquote, born alive until it comes out of the mother's womb. And your exclusive right to enjoy, use, and what property? Dispose of property was ruled on. So you have to remember that the world of Caesar, which is paper, which is objective-based reality, can only rule on that reality. It's a document of limitation and negative liberties, right? So they have to rule within that world. They don't rule with morality and things of that nature most of the time. Sometimes you get a good judge, he does, but I still feel it's a bad decision. But I see the opposite side of why they ruled that way, because it's property. And your exclusive right to enjoy, use, and dispose of property was ruled that way. So on the flip side of that, when we go, Alphonse is talking about corporations, okay? Corporations do, in all law, have the ability to own property. And that's real and tangible property. What the corporation doesn't have that we have is the power to invoke liberty. And that's our substantive rights. So a corporation doesn't have substantive rights, folks. And what they've bamboozled all of us in this intentional dumbing down our society is remove that idea of substantive rights endowed by your creator with these unalienable rights, to where people have no foundation to stand on. And it's really sad to watch how that's happened. And so you remove these ideas from the masses, like George Orwell. They remove the words until they couldn't even think the higher thought. And that's what they've done to us.
Yeah, and let's talk. We talked about the family issues, the family court issues. Listen, this is all coming because of the marriage license. When you get that marriage license, you've now involved the state in your matters, basically. If you didn't have that marriage license, they'd have a hell of a time getting in between your whatever, your breakup from your spouse and your children. Once you get that marriage license, now you involve them in this thing. So I'm going to tell people, listen, if you've made that mistake of getting the marriage license initially, don't do it again. Okay. If you're going to get married again, there's no reason you need a marriage license to get married. But me and Steve talked about this last night. This is one of the problems people are having in family court is they get that marriage license and the breakup happens and your wife, whatever, she goes and files with family court and bang, you're drug into this matter. And now you got this judge that doesn't know anything from anything now making decisions about your life, your marriage and your children.
Well, you asked for a third-party administrator, right? You wanted a license from the state to regulate your marriage, and that's what you went and did. And all the two of you had to do was write out a covenant contract or whatever contract you wanted to do, and
common law marriage. Yeah.
That's it. And so I'm glad you brought me back to the family court too. Anybody out there dealing with children, that is not your property. It is a guardian and ward relationship. Do not go into the court calling your children your property. It's going to be a frivolous argument. Get out of here. It can't be, because only one inhabitant per vessel. Let me say that again. Only one consciousness per vessel. Okay, this is my exclusive right to use, enjoy, and dispose of Brandon's property as long as I cause no harm to anyone else, right? That's my right. That's my right. And the same right with your child. You're just in a guardian and warden relationship. Okay, and
let me touch it real quick. Listen, words have meaning, and listen, even though you and I know that they actually are your property, but you don't want to go into a legal proceeding and say that's my property, because that invokes things of slavery. Okay, that's exactly what that you this is my property. You don't do that. Here's what you argue. You argue your parental rights or your guardianship rights, like Brandon was saying. That's your property. Your property is all rights that belong to you. Well, instead of arguing that they're your property, argue that these are your parental rights, your guardianship rights, and nobody has a right to interfere with them. In a way, you're getting the same benefit of just saying that that's my property, but you now have a legal standing to say my guardianship or my parental rights are my property and you can't interfere with them. Now that's a legal argument that somebody would have to address. If you go in there and say that's my property, they're going to throw it back in your face and make you look like some maniac that that you think everything, that you're like some kind of slave master and these are your little property. So be smart. I said this to somebody that got mad at me. They said, "Well, I call them anything I want." Yeah, you can, but it's not going to help your case when you're before a jury or before a judge. Right? Don't do that.
Well, and really, we have to change this mindset. We have to use the language that's been established as precedent, right? And it's okay. It's okay, because when you understand, and people tell me all the time, Brandon, natural laws disappeared. No, you haven't never read American jurisprudence, because what I'm talking about, substantive rights or natural law, it states right there in parental guardianship, American jurisprudence, and that a natural right is a parental right. It can't be encroached on by anyone. So these rights are all throughout the literature here. And like I said, in order to reduce a society down, you mess with the language first, and then you manipulate reality because people think they know what they're saying. But Alphonse will tell you too, this is a game about precision language. Okay. It's not legalese, a bunch of flamboyant embroidering of your phylacteries. No, we corner them in with precise language built on principles, foundations that don't move: truth, honor, integrity, fortitude, temperance. And what you do is you catch the liars and the manipulators, and you back them right into a corner to where they can't lie anymore. They can't move.
Now, to tie in the property stuff with the family stuff we were just talking about, in American jurisprudence, you'll find that it'll flat out state that the state can only control what it creates. And whatever it creates now becomes a citizen of the state. That means it's within the jurisdiction of the state. and it'll actually state that usually it's a business that's created, but that business is then domiciled in the state. There's your other term, okay? So it becomes a citizen of the state and it's domiciled of the state. Why? Because the business was created under the state. You applied for the business license. Hence, when you get the marriage license, well, now basically you've involved the state by basically, didn't the state basically sort of create your marriage because they're saying, we're granting you a license to get married. And with that license, we're going to provide these certain benefits where if you should get divorced, well, now we're going to intervene in that divorce and we're going to decide who gets what, visitation wise and things like that. So this is why, like I said, that the state can only control what it creates. So yeah, language is precise. And on that, listen, we got to get people away from this fear that a word is going to trap them. They think somebody calls them a citizen, that they're going to lose all their rights because somebody's referring to me as a citizen, and this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because when you read American jurisprudence like you have, it's the complete opposite of what they're telling you, that the people are sovereign, basically. So you're one of the sovereign people, and you'll see it in actual lawsuits, very successful lawsuits, one of the sovereign people of Pennsylvania, right in the lawsuit, sticking it in their face, because you are sovereign. You're one of the people. So yeah, it's really like Brandon said, you got to be precise with the language. You've got to understand what the language means, but you got to leave these little fears alone of that somebody calls me a citizen or a defendant or something, and I'm going to lose all my rights. Doesn't work like that.
Well, and if you study language and if you study these things, though, what you'll see is like the free man on the land philosophy that's in American jurisprudence, right? This idea that has no precedence and is actually frowned upon, and you go sit in the court arguing this. But yet, if you go read, I think it's Title 8, 1247. Don't. It may be 1427. I might have those backed up, but it states right there: American nationals and citizens hold the same powers and authorities. Okay. So the only place that I have found as of yet where that is a little tricky is in the IRS code, but they use U.S. persons, okay, which is a different classification. So according to Title 26 Internal Revenue Code, you are a non-resident alien. All you're doing is saying you're not part of the municipal corporation operating in the 6 mile square of Washington, D.C. So I think that messes people up, because with that particular code, it's a different configuration other than everything else. But again, you're just not part of that municipality. And once you grasp that concept, that geographical location that is the 6 mile square for the IRS code, and you're not part of that in operating a federal franchise scheme, same thing, and subject to the taxpayer code. Well, when you understand that, you'll grasp, and you won't apply that to everything everywhere else. The IRS code is a standalone code. It applies nowhere else.
Yeah, I mean, you are both a citizen of the state and you were a citizen of the United States, whether you like it or not. I hear people saying all this ridiculous stuff, but that's how it works, basically. And we just talked about that a state can only control what it creates. Well, it didn't create you, and it didn't create your property. So I could be a citizen of the state, but not have any duties or obligations to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's the corporation in there that's using the state territory. Remember, if you're of something, you can't be it, right? If you're Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you're not Pennsylvania. You're a corporation of Pennsylvania, but they conflated the two and made people believe that they are Pennsylvania. No, they're a corporation of Pennsylvania. They are not Pennsylvania. So I could be a citizen of the state, but doesn't create any duties or obligations upon me to the Commonwealth, because why? They didn't create me. I'm not a creature of the state. That if I was a business owner, if I created a business under the state, they would have a citizen with me, basically, because now they would have a nexus with me and they can control my business.
And they would regulate that through license.
Right. Right.
So when you think about it, we'll double back, because regulation comes at the state level with license and marriage license. Okay. So understand this, guys. The regulation comes at the state level through licensing. And that's why we minimum contract now, right? I don't need licenses from anybody for other than the day job that I do carry. I do carry a commercial driver's license. That's my trade. So guess what Brandon does? I operate in commerce. Well, there's an irrefutable fact that Congress has the right to what? Tax commerce and regulate commerce. So guess what Brandon has to do? Because I operate in commerce. I keep my commercial driver's license.
Yeah, I mean, if you have one of them businesses where you could actually run it yourself and you're not dependent on outside other businesses, there's really no reason for you to register anything with the state. But like you said, certain businesses you're involved with or certain professions you have, they're going to require you have a license. And if you have a business, you may have to purchase something else from other businesses. You might rely on that. They may not work with you or deal with you unless you have a license. So in certain professions or businesses, you're going to be forced to get that license if you want to operate in that profession or that thing. But if you're an individual where if I'm Joe Smith and I got a computer repair business, I don't need a license from the state. I could do that all on my own property. I don't need to involve them in anything. So certain matters you're going to need like you said, you're going to need a business license. It's just the way of the world as far as they do have control over corporations. And that's not a bad thing because when they built the roads, when they first built these roads, these heavy trucks and all did a lot of damage to the roads. And they were actually dangerous. You got these huge heavy trucks going around. And they wanted to make sure that they were safe, that when they're rolling down the road, they were safe and that they weren't tearing up the road. So that's where the licensing thing came with the driving stuff. That's the transportation code. People that are engaged in moving people and goods on the roads, that's transportation. And as we know, they've conflated the two and made everyone believe that everyone's involved in transportation.
And they did.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get back onto due process because a lot of people don't have aren't on our telegrams, but I want to read some things for y'all from American Jurisprudence. I put this together today in a Word document, and it's on the Telegram chat if people want to go there or Alphonse's group. I do these from time to time when I try to point people in the right direction. Let's go to Constitutional Law, Chapter 14, Due Process of Law, American Jurisprudence, Section 933. A lot of people aren't going to understand the difference between the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment, but I want y'all to have this clarification. The guarantee of due process found in the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution declares that no person will be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment declares that no state will deprive any person of life, liberty, property without due process of law, and is a limitation only on the powers of the states. So your fifth is a national protection, and then your 14th is a state protection. Equal, that horrible 14th Amendment we've heard so much about. It's an equal protection. So Brandon goes from Louisiana into Texas. I'm not all of a sudden subjugated to a tyrannical dictator's rule over there in Texas or vice versa. and what you have here, these ideas, I want people to pay attention. Life, liberty. Liberty can only be invoked by those with life. Okay. Creatures of statute, corporations have no life in them. They have no standing. And then property. Okay. And these ideas are substantive rights, unalienable. And what has happened in our modern time is that we have found ourselves in a situation where our entire lives have liens on them. And we've been, with feigned words, made merchandise out of, Alphonse.
Yeah, I mean, there's that 14th Amendment and that pesky 14th Amendment. That's your golden road into federal district court. That's what allows you to hold. You can't sue the state itself. I can't sue the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but I could sue the actors that work for the state. And then the political subdivisions we're talking about, the municipalities, they're considered persons under law. So I could sue them as a person. I could sue the Township of Aston. I could sue the County of Delaware. Okay. That 14th Amendment allows me to do that. That allows me to bring these people into federal district court and hold them accountable. And if you don't appreciate that, go talk to my cousin over in New Zealand who's having a hell of a time over there with the stuff they're doing, and the people in Australia that are having a hell of a time. because they don't have these rights that you have. They don't have these guaranteed secured rights to hold people accountable. And so that 14th Amendment, I mean, you should hit your knees every night and thank the creator that somebody was intelligent enough to put that in there and push that, because that's your protection in a lot of stuff. And it does not make you a slave. Okay. Everyone thinks 14th Amendment. No, it does not make you a slave. It's the complete opposite. And I've seen several successful pleadings, some for multi-million-dollar settlements. And that 14th Amendment is strewn throughout those pleadings. So nonsense when people tell you that the 14th Amendment's bad.
Well, let's talk about this, right? Well, I'll realtor, you bring that comment up later, and we'll discuss that comment later. But I want to stay focused on the. You can't. You're still worried about things that have no nature to you. That's not a license. Okay, it's a certificate of birth. It's just acknowledging that you have been born alive. That's it. That's it. Roe v. Wade is statutized in Title 1, wherever the born alive statutes are. Roe v. Wade, that decision has been codified in Title 1 of the United States Constitution. We'll talk about that later. I want to continue on. I want to read.
Let me just real quick.
Go ahead.
Let me this realtor thing real quick here. Okay, listen, a birth certificate. Okay, know what that determines? That you were born a certain place at a certain time. That's the only thing that thing does. Okay, it creates no duties and obligations upon you. I don't care if your parents signed it or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't create any duties or obligations upon you. So it is totally different than a license, because a marriage license you willingly apply for. When I'm an infant, okay, I'm not willingly applying to do anything, okay? So that piece of paper is a nullity. It means nothing. And you got the whole thing, capital letters name. You think if somebody hits the shift key and types your name, it somehow granted them jurisdiction and waived your rights because they put your name in all caps instead of upper and lowercase.
Well,
has jurisdiction, okay?
Who went arguing it 2 years ago, Alphonse? I mean, you don't have to look any further than this chat room right here to see someone who walked into open court and wanted to argue about the straw man and what it got me. And I'm going to tell you, I've gotten further by applying with the law all the way up to the White House with Secret Service agents. I've helped thousands and thousands of people over the course of the last year doing it correctly. I had a piece of it. I could see that they were scared of something. I just didn't know how to pin them in that corner yet.
And did anyone at any time ever say to you about a birth certificate? Did anything wow? Did that ever come up? Or citizenship? Did anyone's citizenship ever come up? Okay.
No, it's never come up. It was me arguing it. It was me, like a knucklehead. It was me. And so I had to move on past these ideas because those ideas don't work. So once you find something that doesn't work, you don't go beating your head up against the wall and continually you go to the next path. And that's the path of growth, Alphonse. You know it. That's like I see people every day on your chat room. Where's your AOS? And you're like, guys, that's old information, right? Let me help you move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another one. Do we own a birth certificate? Who cares if you own your birth certificate? It doesn't matter. It's a birdcage liner, okay? Listen, the only time you would really need that if somebody accused you of not being a U.S. citizen or American citizen, and you needed proof somehow that you were. It doesn't matter, okay? That birth certificate does not create a duty or obligation upon you. And I don't really want to get into the trust stuff, but you can't create a secret trust, and then securitize somebody's name and they don't know about it. That's called securities fraud, and people would go to jail. And people have gone to jail for that, okay?